A beacon of light emanates from the sky and shines upon a fatal car crash.
There's a bad wreck.
Do you know if anyone's injured?
I'm sure there are. It looks pretty bad.
23-year-old new mom Hannah Simmons was taking her baby girl Alana for a routine checkup at the doctor when police say she lost control of her car and crashed head-on into a truck. High school student Anissa Gannon was on her way to work in Gainesville, Georgia, when she came upon the scene. She took the photo with her cell phone to prove to her boss that she had a good reason for being late.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, oh, let it be.
In the operating room, in comes Dr. Takata, whom I had never laid eyes on before. He introduced himself.
Hi, Mr. Sullivan. Good afternoon. Dr. Takata. I'm Hiro Takata, and I'm a cardiovascular surgeon.
And he told me what he was going to do.
We're going to take the veins from the legs, and also we take artery from chest wall, and we plan to do 4 or 5 bypasses for you.
And I'm listening, listening.
You're going to do very well in this operation. Now, Dr.
And all of a sudden, I don't have to listen to him telling me. I can see what he's doing. Because I found out that I wasn't there to listen anymore. I just left my body and watched. I can see, but I'm up looking down at that. Used to be me. It wasn't me, because the real me is up here watching. That's when they started putting stuff over my eyes and all kinds of drapes and blankets all around me. And I could see Dr. Takata and his people. And this is another thing. I could see through the operating table and me, and I could see what kind of boots he had on. At one point, he stepped back. The surgeon stepped back, and it looked like he's flapping his arms. And I thought, what in the world is he doing that for?
Dr. Takata, when he's not operating and trying not to contaminate his hands, will put his hands close to his chest and point with his elbow.
That's just a part of the, my signal here now. I send to scrub nurse or people around me who assist me with the operation.
He was orchestrating, do this, do that, do that. And it did seem very foreign to me what he was doing.
Al Sullivan would not know of this peculiar behavior of Dr. Takata. I did not tell him that.
I cannot explain how he saw these things under the complete sleep of anesthesia.
Even if he was conscious. It would be impossible for Al to see Dr. Takata's stance or arm movement because Al is behind a drape that blocks the vision of the patient, and his eyes were taped shut.
There is no explanation for that in current neuroscience. I personally and professionally am not afraid of saying that I don't know.
What circumstances that either led to a near-death experience or aspects of the near-death experience itself do you feel proves that consciousness exists out of the body?
Sure. It's probably the strongest 3 lines of evidence are, as we've been talking about, that out-of-body experience. Mm-hmm. When you're unconscious or clinically dead, that is medically inexplicable, and yet near-death experiencers in my study group by the scores describe seeing, hearing things far beyond their physical body and far beyond any possible physical sensory awareness. They may code in the operating room and hear and see their family talking in the hospital cafeteria. They may code in the emergency room and see vividly and down to fine details their spouses or other family members down in the waiting room. And when they describe what went on far from their physical body, it's almost invariably accurate down to the finest detail. That's one. Number two, visual, highly visual near-death experiences have been described in those born totally blind. That's absolutely impossible. It's impossible for someone born totally blind to have vision, let alone when they're also unconscious. And yet, these have been reported, and that is beyond any possible medical explanation. Probably the third strongest line of evidence is the near-death experiences occurring under general anesthesia. When you code, when your heart stops while you're under general anesthesia, it should be, if you will, doubly impossible to have a conscious experience. When your heart stops, you can't have a conscious experience. When you're under general anesthesia, you shouldn't have any kind of remembrance at all. When it occurs both at the same time, it's doubly impossible. And yet, by the scores, experiences, near-death experiences under general anesthesia have been described. They absolutely do occur, and they're very typical near-death experiences, indistinguishable in their content, including their degree of consciousness and alertness, from near-death experiences that occur under all other circumstances.
Here's the question, I guess. Cynical people, if they're clever, can turn any issue into a mud fight. And we see that every time we turn on the news. Science is no different, and it muddies the water. It makes it hard for people to understand. Why is science attacking this? What is at stake for science with near-death experience research that they're so afraid of?
I think the concept of near-death experiences, that we're much more than our physical brain, that there really is a immaterial part of us that survives bodily death, is so radically different from what mainstream science believes and is taught for literally for centuries, that I think near-death experience evidence is such a huge paradigm shift that it's unfamiliar, certainly, to a lot of scientists. It is certainly disconcerting to them when it flies in the face of everything that they've ever believed or even taught in the classroom for years or decades. And so I think that there's a lot of scientists that in the mainstream that will just simply instinctively assume that it cannot be true and only seek out the evidence that will help justify their beliefs.
Does near-death experiences differ in children versus adults?
Great question. My study group, the children were age 5 and younger, and I had 23 of these very young children, average age of 3.5 years old, and they're practically culturally a blank slate. To children that young, they almost certainly have never heard of a near-death experience. Death is an abstraction unknown and unknowable to children that young, and they almost certainly don't have well-developed cultural or religious beliefs about what happens when we die. When I studied that group, I looked at 33 elements, that is, that which occurs in near-death experiences, and in these very young children, they were identical to the elements occurring in older children and adults. No difference whatsoever in their near-death experiences.
When the night is cloudy